The secret sauce of Amazon, where there are several principles at Amazon, but the number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor. And I talk so often to other CEOs and some other CEOs and also founders and entrepreneurs, and I can tell that even though they're talking about customers, they're really focusing on competitors. And it is a huge advantage to any company if you can stay focused on your customer instead of your competitor. My approach to criticism and what I teach and preach inside Amazon is when you're criticized, first look in a mirror and decide, are your critics right? If they're right, change. There are two kinds of critics. There are well-meaning critics who, they're worried it's not going to work, but they do want it to work. And so it could be, I can give you an example, customer reviews would be one of those. When we first did customer reviews 20 years ago, some book publishers were not happy about it because some of them were negative. And so it was a very controversial practice at that time, but we thought it was right. And so we stuck to our guns and had a deep heel on that and didn't change. But there's a second kind of critic, which is the self-interested critic, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So they can be any kind of institution, competitors, of course. And so when you are doing something in a new way, and if customers embrace the new way, what's going to happen is incumbents who are practicing the older way are not going to like you. And they're going to be self-interested critics. And so you do need, as you're looking yourself in the mirror, to try and tease those two things apart. If you're going to do anything new or innovative, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. And if you can't tolerate that, then for God's sake, don't do anything new or innovative. Every important thing we've done has been misunderstood, often by well-meaning, sincere critics, sometimes, of course, by self-interested, insincere critics. I think stress, you can be, I think one of the things that's very important to note about stress is that stress primarily comes from not taking action over something that you can have some control over. So if I find that some particular thing is causing me to have stress, that's a warning flag for me. What it means is there's something that I haven't completely identified, perhaps in my conscious mind, that is bothering me, and I haven't yet taken any action on it. I find as soon as I identify it and make the first phone call or send off the first email message or whatever it is that we're going to do to start to address that situation, even if it's not solved, the mere fact that we're addressing it dramatically reduces any stress that might come from it. So stress comes from ignoring things that you shouldn't be ignoring, I think in large part. So stress doesn't come, people get stress wrong all the time, in my opinion. Stress doesn't come from hard work, for example. You can be working incredibly hard and loving it. And likewise, you can be out of work and incredibly stressed over that. So, and likewise, if you kind of use that as an analogy for what I was just talking about, if you're out of work, but you're going through, a disciplined approach of, a series of job interviews and so on and working to remedy that situation, you're going to be a lot less stressed than if you're just worrying about it and doing nothing. I don't really remember the exact day or anything, but when I was in college is when I started thinking about wanting to be an entrepreneur someday. So I was not the kid with the lemonade stand. I wasn't one of these kids who was always trying to raise money. I always wanted to be a scientist when I was little, but I'd also always loved computers. I was lucky because at my age this is unusual to have access to a mainframe computer from my elementary school when I was in 4th grade. And quickly learned that there was a pre-programmed Star Trek game on that computer, and then I never did anything except play Star Trek with the computer. So I don't know how formative that was. It certainly helped my Star Trek knowledge considerably. But I've always loved computers. Somewhere in college, I started watching some of the people who were like setting up, college pizza delivery services and, the core entrepreneurs, and thinking, this looks like a really fun thing to do. do something you're very passionate about. And don't try to chase what is kind of the hot passion of the day. I think we actually saw this, I think you see it all over the place in many different contexts, but I think we saw it in the internet world quite a bit, where, at the sort of peak of the sort of internet, mania in, say, 1999, you found people who were, very passionate about something. They kind of left that job and decided, I'm going to, do something in the internet, because it's, it was almost like the 1849 gold rush in a way. I mean, you find that people, if you go back and study the history of the 1849 gold rush, you find that, at that time, everybody who was within shouting distance of California was, they might have been a doctor, but they quit being a doctor and they started panning for gold. And that almost never works. And even if it does work, according to some metric, financial success or whatever it might be, I suspect it leaves you ultimately unsatisfied. So you really need to be very clear with yourself. And I think one of the best ways to do that is this notion of projecting yourself forward to age 80, looking back on your life and trying to make sure you've minimized the number of regrets you have. That works for career decisions. It works for family decisions. Do you want, I have a 14-month-old son, and it's very easy for me to, if I think about myself when I'm 80, I know I want to watch that little guy grow up. And so I don't want to be 80 and think, shoot, I missed that whole thing and I don't have the kind of relationship with my son that I wished I had, and so on and so on. So if you think about that, so I guess another thing that I would recommend to people is that they always take a long-term point of view. And I think this is something about which there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of people, and I'm just not one of them, believe that you should live for the now. I think what you do is you think about the great expanse of time ahead of you and try to make sure that you're planning for that in a way that's going to leave you ultimately satisfied. So this is the way it works for me. And I mean, everybody needs to find that for themselves. So I think there are a lot of paths to satisfaction, and you need to find one that works for you. When I decided to do this, I first talked to my wife, who is sitting here in the audience, and she had married a relatively stable, goofy, but still relatively stable person working at a Wall Street firm. I worked at a quantitative hedge fund, and this was a hard decision. And I was looking for the right framework in which to make that kind of important decision. And the right framework I found is a regret minimization framework. And so that's just a nerdy way of saying that you want to project yourself to age 80, and then think back over your life. And if you're 80, what are you want to minimize the number of regrets you have throughout that period of time. I think this is something a lot of people do, maybe subconsciously. Very few people probably name it regret minimization framework, because most people are healthier than that. But it was a very clear way for me to think about making that kind of life decision. And the way it helped was, I thought, okay, if I go do this thing and participate in this thing called the internet that I genuinely believe is going to be a big deal, and if I fail, am I going to regret having tried and failed? And I knew the answer to that was no. But I also knew that if I didn't try, that I would always regret that. I would always wonder, and it would haunt me until that mythical day, which I actually hope will come. Whatever it is that you want to do, there's going to be risk in your life, and risk is a necessary component of progress. You can make any pioneering movements in the world of any kind, whether they be the geographical, physical exploration that I've just been talking about, or whether it be a more cerebral exploration of a scientific field. Or I bet you could ask that question of every speaker here, and I bet that every speaker here has taken substantial risks, whether it be intellectual or otherwise, to achieve what they've done.
By the way, getting it wrong isn't that bad.
That's the other thing. when we make mistakes, and we've made doozies like the Fire Phone and many other things that just didn't work out, we don't have enough time for me to list all of our failed experiments, but the big winners pay for thousands of failed experiments. So you try something like Prime, and it was very expensive at the beginning. It cost us a lot of money, because what happens when you offer a free all-you-can-eat buffet? Who shows up to the buffet first? The heavy eaters. It's scary. It's like, oh my God, did I really say as many prawns as you can eat? Oh. And so that is what happened. But surely we could see the trend lines. We could see that all kinds of customers were coming, and they appreciated that service. I believe in the power of wandering. All of my best decisions in business and in life have been made with heart, intuition, guts, not analysis. When you can make a decision with analysis, you should do so, but it turns out in life that your most important decisions are always made with instinct, intuition, taste, heart,